Ukrainian troops reportedly made major efforts to end the stalemate on the battlefield and penetrated Russian lines in southeastern Ukraine for a second day. The action marked the start of a long-anticipated counteroffensive after 15 months of war. Russian officials have tried to portray the Ukrainian offensive as the prelude to a counteroffensive, saying Moscow forces thwarted at least one attack. While not explicitly confirming such a large-scale effort, authorities in Kiev said their troops were indeed stepping up offensive operations, but indicated some of the Russian announcements were inappropriate. Vladimir Rogov, an official in the Russian-backed administration in Ukraine's partly occupied Zaporizhzhia province, said fighting continued on its border with the eastern Donetsk province after Russian defenses repelled Ukrainian advances earlier in the day. Moscow claims to have repelled Ukrainian attempts to break through Russian defenses, but some pro-Kremlin military bloggers paint a different picture, acknowledging that Kiev's forces are making some quick advances. The enemy is putting even greater forces into the offensive than yesterday, and the new attempt to break through the front line is more large-scale and organized, Rogov said, adding it. Rogov interpreted Ukraine's military moves as part of an effort to reach the shores of the Sea of Azov and cut off a land corridor to the Crimean Peninsula, which Moscow annexed in 2014. Analysts have long viewed the strategy as possible because it would cut Russian troops and heavily strain supplies to Crimea, which had served as Russia's main military center in the war that began February 24, 2022. Rogov's comments came after Moscow also said its troops thwarted a major Ukrainian offensive in Donetsk province, near its border with Zaporizhzhia province. Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk are two of four provinces that President Vladimir Putin claimed as Russian territory last fall and which Moscow partially controls. Russia's defense ministry said it had repelled large-scale attacks at 5 sites in the Donetsk province. The announcement could not be independently verified, and while Ukrainian officials reported fighting in the area, they denied having been pushed back. Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Igor Konashenkov said in a video overnight that 250 Ukrainian personnel died fighting in Donetsk, and 16 Ukrainian tanks, 3 infantry fighting vehicles, and 21 armored fighting vehicles were destroyed. Some Russian military bloggers offered a less optimistic view, saying Ukrainian troops had made some gains and were deploying more resources to exploit that success. Some said it was the first time German-made Leopard tanks had been seen in significant numbers in the area. In response, the Strategic Communications Center of the Ukrainian Armed Forces said Russian troops were increasing their information and psychological operations. This is to demoralize Ukraine and mislead the people, including their own population. Russian propaganda will spread false information about the counterattack, its directives and losses of the Ukrainian army. Even if there is no counterattack, read a statement on Telegram. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia was overreacting to his last push. "We saw how hysterical Russia looked at every step we took there, every position we took," Zelensky said in his evening address. Ukrainian officials have been saying for months that a spring campaign with advanced weapons supplied by Western allies to retake territory captured by Russia during the war is planned, but they have remained silent about when, how, and where it will start, or whether it will already occurred. Recent military activity, including drone attacks on Moscow, cross-border incursions into Russia, and sabotage and drone attacks on infrastructure behind Russian lines, has terrified Russians. Analysts say the move may be the start of a backlash. In recent weeks, Ukraine has intensified attacks on Russian positions and successfully countered Russian attempts to extend its gains beyond the eastern city of Bakhmut, which it captured last month in the war's longest and bloodiest battle. Pro-Kiev Russian paramilitary groups that have fought alongside the Ukrainian armed forces have also launched cross-border incursions into Russian territory, striking the Belgorod region. Ukrainian shelling and cross-border attacks destroyed several towns and villages near the border and forced the evacuation of thousands of residents, angering Russian hawks who criticized the Kremlin for failing to strike back decisively. Military analysts described the offensive as part of an operation meant to probe Russia's defenses, forcing Moscow to thinly spread its forces and draw attention away from areas where Ukraine might focus its counteroffensive. The Russian military, in turn, has intensified attacks deep inside Ukraine, launching an almost daily barrage of drone and missile attacks on high-value military facilities. Russia says it destroyed a U.S.-made Patriot missile defense system in Kiev, successfully attacked a military intelligence base, also in the Ukrainian capital, and hit air bases and weapons depots in several areas. These claims cannot be independently verified. Ukrainian officials acknowledged some of the attacks but kept the damage secret. Russian military bloggers described them as part of Moscow's efforts to thwart a counteroffensive by softening Ukraine's air defenses and destroying Western weapons and ammunition meant for the campaign. In Washington, a U.S. official, who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive matters, said, "We have no reason to believe that any Russian actions have had any deleterious effect on pending or ongoing Ukrainian operations." Military analysts say Ukraine has tried to conceal its intentions by launching multiple strikes in several sectors of the front line to force Russia to deploy its resources and distract them from where the main strike will be launched. The attacks in the Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk regions, developments in Russia's Belgorod region, and the increasingly frequent attacks on Russian military depots in the rear are part of Ukraine's preparations for a counteroffensive, said Ukrainian military analyst Roman Spytin. Kyiv is looking for Russia's weak points and trying to spread the front as wide as possible. Many military experts predict Ukraine will try to break through Russian defenses to the coast of the Sea of Azov, to break through the land corridor to Crimea that Moscow created after capturing the key port of Mariupol. Russian officials and military bloggers say that the latest offensive in the southern Donetsk region and neighboring Zaporizhzhia region could mark the start of the big push.